Take one, A, B and C camera.
When did you start writing songs, Bernard?
Oh God. Well, I first got a guitar when I was 16. I liked the idea of being in a group, really. But it hurt my hands a lot, the guitar. You know, the wires are so thin.
Yeah, it's agonising.
So I gave up, basically. It was too difficult, and I didn't have any lessons. And other things came along when I was 16, like, you know, girls and a social life. So I kind of stopped, and then it stood in the corner of my bedroom, gathering dust and cobwebs, and I got into punk music, really. I was into music before that, but the moment of, you know, no return, really, was when I went to see the Sex Pistols, amongst other bands of that era, in about 1976. It seemed something new and fresh, and also it was quite enticing that they didn't make a virtue out of virtuosity. You know, up until then, you know, you had to be an absolute virtuoso at your instrument or at singing to become a musician. Anything else was not acceptable. And then punk brought in a do-it-yourself attitude that, you know, you could get out, you know, if you couldn't play
so what?
1,000 notes a minute, so what, you know, if what you were playing was interesting, but that was the subtle difference, was that it had to be interesting what you were playing. So me and Peter Hook had gone to school together, and we'd gone to some punk gigs, just decided to form a band, you know. So he bought a bass, I had a guitar, and bought a book, how to play a guitar, how to play the bass. We both read the books and then wrote a song. So that was how the first song came about, and we used to, we didn't have amplifiers, we used to rehearse in my grandmother's parlour, and there was an old, like, valve gramophone thing in there, and I took the needle out and put a couple of guitar sockets on it and play through.
Did grandmother mind when she tried to put on her record? Imagine it was a bit frustrating.
No, but I didn't come from a musical background, but I mean, the first time I had my ears open, so to speak, to music was when I got a record player when I was like 14, and the first record I bought was Mark Bolan, Ride a White Swan, and I was kind of into pop music. And then I went to see a film, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, and heard Ennio Morricone's music in that film, and that was another moment of catharsis. I just loved the music, and that was the first album I bought. A few crap ones in between, but I'm not going to mention those.
Some good starts there, though. So when you met Peter Hook, and well, not when you met him, but when you started making music together, and you said that you got chord books, and so you learned, I guess, the absolute basics to be able to string a song together. Yeah,
well, then we got bored of playing in my grandmother's front room, and we started advertising for a singer and a drummer, and we got, I interviewed a few lunatics to be the singer, and we ended up with Ian, who was not a lunatic, and we went through about 5 different drummers. I remember we felt embarrassed about sacking him, so what we used to do was, and this was Hookie's idea, we used to buy him a box of chocolates.
Nice touch as you give him the boot.
And say, look, sorry mate, you're not the guy for us, but how about this?
How about some dairy milk?
Give him a box of chocolates, yeah. It was a very strange idea.
What was the first song that was written?
Well, once we got a drummer, which was Steve Morris, and started writing, we could then write full songs with vocals, drums. But of course, Joy Division was the first band we'd ever been in. And these songs were the first songs we'd ever wrote, you know. So they were pretty crude, sort of fumbled attempt at punk music, you know. We'd just learned, and then went back in our rehearsal room and wrote another set of songs. That other set of songs was Unknown Pleasures.
Okay.
So,
and that was...
so the first set was kind of aping punk, really, in not a very good way.
It's like a practice run.
Yeah, it was a practice run, yeah. It was learning, you know.
But
steep learning curve.
The thing is, I think one of the reasons why Joy Division must have had such a unique sound was because you did teach yourselves. You didn't have, you know, possibly because you weren't classically trained musicians, it was almost like by doing things wrong, it was an originality and a creativity.
Well, there was definitely a naivety to it, and it's like Hook used to play high up on his bass. The reason why he played high up on his bass was because I had this Vox guitar amp called a U30, and it was incredibly loud, but I wanted it to distort. And the only way you could get distortion was to turn it up loud. So he couldn't hear himself playing low, so he used to play high and get those high lines, you know. So that was, it just happened as an accident, you know. We didn't know what we were doing, but, you know, we were all fans, deep fans of music. Steve had still has a huge collection of records. Me and Ucky were really key. We had a lot of records and were keen on going out to see bands. Ian used to work in a record shop. I think he used to work in Rare Records in Manchester at one point. So we were all keen music fans, and it was just simply learning how to reverse that process so that we became exponents of music rather than, you know, punters, really.
Okay.
We'd do stuff like someone would bring in, probably Ian would bring in Iggy's new album, you know. I remember, or Bowie's new album, Low or Heroes or something, you know, and we'd listen to that and go, whoa, let's do something like that. But we wouldn't try and copy it, we'd just listen to the vibe on it. And we liked the vibe, the sort of dark vibe or whatever, and we'd try and write something that just had a similar vibe to it.
There's this incredible atmosphere in the music, and there is a New Order too, and in electronic, but with Joy Division there's a feeling that kind of, it seemed to capture something of Britain at the time.
Well, I think that we just knew that we didn't like what we were hearing on Radio 1, for example. We didn't like pop music. At that stage, you know, I mentioned people like Mark Bolan. Obviously, there's some good examples of pop music, but the general 90% of the output of, say, Radio 1 was horrible. Housewives, music. Not that I've got anything against housewives, but you know what I mean. So that was the template. What they were playing on the radio, we were going to play the opposite of it. I guess that was one direction. I guess the other thing that made us write what we were writing was our own personal experiences in our lives, what we'd gone through personally, you know. And I'd had quite a difficult upbringing due to ill health within my family. And the difficulties I had as a child came out in the darkness of my music, really. Plus, sort of the brutal surroundings of Manchester and Salford in the late 70s were, you know, I mean, I think I saw a tree till I was like 9 years old. Literally, didn't see a tree, and it was just, you know, red brick factories everywhere you looked, and decaying industry and industrial landscapes, and ruined houses, and, you know, it's basically the whole city looked like a bloody bomb site. When I was growing up as a kid, in fact, we used to play on bomb sites. And
when was Love Will Tear Us Apart written?
Now you're asking. Well, we didn't get gigs like regularly. Rob, our manager, Rob Gretton, would just come down to the rehearsal room and go, I've got a gig for you. When? 2 weeks. Right, okay, let's write a song for it. And we'd write a new song for that gig. And then we'd try it out at the gig and then rewrite it a little bit after the gig. So it possibly came about like that. But you've got to remember, I may seem a bit dumb not remembering about my own song, but we've probably written about 200, 300 songs, you know.
But you're coming out of Joy Division in the most tragic way possible, which is Ian Curtis's death. And very quickly, New Order forms, and it must have been a huge pressure, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, we didn't know what we were going to do. We didn't know what the solution was. And somehow it didn't feel right to get someone else in the group. It was approached by a couple of people who wanted to be the singer, but it just seemed like, well, that would be an incredible job for them to do to replace Ian. And it just didn't feel right, so we decided that one of us was going to do it. So what we did was we all tried singing. We also decided very bravely and very naively that we weren't going to play any of the Joy Division songs, that if we were going to make it, we didn't want people to say, oh, they've only made it because they were in Joy, you know, because they were Joy Division.
Because of the legacy.
Because of the legacy, yes. So what we did Well, so we wrote a whole new set of songs again, which formed the basis of the first New Order album movement, which was kind of daft because it was making a tough situation more difficult for us, and I think it was Rob Gretton that pushed us into that idea. It was very honourable, but I felt that musically we were kind of doing a Joy Division and capturing the mood of Joy Division, but without Ian. So for me, it wasn't working.
You needed to move on.
We needed to move on. We also, on the eve of Ian's death, Ian died the night before we were due to play an American tour. We were going to play at a club in New York called Hurrah's. And there was a girl there, Ruth Polsky, and she put the tour on, and we said, look, can we come over and we'll pick up the Joy Division tour as New Order when we've written enough songs, you know. She was like, sure, yeah, do that, yeah. So we did a tour of the eastern seaboard of the United States, and with this new set of songs, with each of us trying to sing, you know. We did the tour, and Rob just said, you should be the singer to me. So I ended up as the singer. That's how it happened.
So then, from there, New Order really does get a very different sound.
Yeah. Well, part of the benefits of doing this trip to New York was that every night when we'd finish in the studio, we used to go around the clubs of New York, and that opened certainly my ears up to a new kind of music that was being played in clubs, and club music, you know. And I just remember sitting there thinking, wouldn't it be great if one of our tracks was played in it? They did play one of our tracks, actually. I can't remember what it was. But it just sort of dawned on me that it would be good to write at least one song in this vein, the vein of music that we're hearing there. And just got excited about it, really. The next time we were in a studio, which was back in England with Martin, we just happened to find a drum machine and a synthesizer. It just happened to be in the studio, which was quite rare in those days. And we got the output of the drum machine, plugged it into the synthesizer, pressed go on the drum machine, and it started pulsing the synthesizer. I was like, hey, listen to this. Martin, come and listen to this. Let's write a track with it, let's write a track with it. He went, all right, yeah. So we took him into, he was great at experimenting, Martin. So we took them into the studio, but we had to, Steve wanted to play live drums on it, so we had to sync it up to the drums. So we got Steve to put a drum track down, and then Martin got one of the VU meters and it had a test output on it, and he plugged the cable from the test output of the VU meter into the synth, and whoa, it triggered from Steve's hi-hat. So we then wrote Everything's Gone Green, which was the first of that type of track, you know, which was kind of electronic track. I was also listening to things like E = MC squared by Giorgio Moroder, Kraftwerk. Ian was big into Kraftwerk. So we did like the electronics sound, you know, sound of synthesizers and stuff. We used to play Trans-Europe Express before we went on stage, and we were keen on that kind of experimental sound anyway. And then it was a steep learning curve to how to make this stuff work.
Did you have much experience of this
the
kind of technology?
difficulty was, anything we had to do, anything that we did in the studio, we had to be able to do it live. Right. So it was one thing doing in the studio. It was like, okay, how are we going to make this stuff work live? You know.
And it must change. It's a different approach to songwriting, isn't it? If you discover, you know, for example, what you were just saying about how Martin Hannett had discovered this new way of syncing up the drums, and then that's almost becomes the point of the song, rather than playing a song on a guitar and then thinking, okay, how can we use this equipment?
It was exciting. It was like a new world opening to us, new world of music opening to us, just at the time when we needed it, when we needed a new direction. We just couldn't go on, you know, try to be Joy Division without Ian. Like, you know, it's a bit like trying to be the Jimi Hendrix Experience without Jimi Hendrix.
It's time to change.
It was never going to work. It was never going to work. Keep some of the elements, yeah, sure, you know. Bucky's bass, Steve's drums, but change the rest.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to songwriting, where do you start if you're going to make electronic dance music? I mean, I know we're not playing it here, but Blue Monday, what does that start with? Because it's not a traditional song in any way whatsoever.
Yeah, Blue Monday came from a lot of music that I'd been listening to, and I just took all the elements of my favourite tracks and then made them into one song. And the bass line in my head was sounding like Sylvester, You Make Me Feel Mighty Real, that kind of thing.
Sounds nothing like it, actually, does it?
No, it doesn't, no.
But that's the starting point.
That kind of thing, you know. The arrangement came from Klein and MBO's Dirty Talk, where I just used their arrangement, you know, like, okay, they've got a section of strings coming in now, I'll have a section of strings coming in now, and I'll you know, I didn't copy the music, just the arrangement. And the beat, I heard the beat on a Donna Summer record. I thought that's a great beat, that, yeah, we loved that. And the voices at the start came from Kraftwerk. So it was a bit like in the early 90s when DJs were putting together, they get the records, and then made a new record. They use a bit out of this record, a bit out of that record, a bit out of that record. Say S Express, for instance. But I was doing it, but not with records, doing it with music. And
all these ideas throw together, but then also, and you're using this new technology, but then you've got to have a melody in there, and that's what people remember. You know, the melody stays.
Well, not particularly in Blue Monday, which is why we're not going to play it today, because Blue Monday, to me, isn't really a song. It's a machine that makes you want to dance.
Yeah.
So it's a classic track, but unfortunately, I don't think it suits acoustic guitars.
No, it's not quite made for a six-stringed acoustic. But Bizarre Love Triangle does work. So when was this written?
Yeah, Bizarre Love Triangle. Unlike most of the others, this is one that I did write mostly at home and brought to the studio. Blue Monday was done at the studio with everyone else around. But Bizarre Love Triangle, we just got it's not a synthesizer, it's a sampler called an emulator. And it was an emulator 2, and it had this fancy arpeggiator on it. So I took it home to try and work out how to work it, and just came up with a song and then took it in, and everyone did overdubs on it.
So an arpeggiator, presumably, my musical knowledge is fairly scant, but I know what an arpeggiated chord is, and so presumably an arpeggiator picks out the notes, does it?
Yeah, it'll play, if you hold a chord down, it'll play
the notes in the chord.
Run up and down the notes, yeah.
Okay.
And you can set which direction it goes in. So I just really got into it. I was very inspired by the instrument and wrote Bizarre Love Triangle.
What do you start with? Do you start with the music, or do the lyrics come first?
Always the music, really. Yeah, the music's got to be... Lyric writing is a chore. It is difficult work. I mean, like usually the music, you've got other musicians around. It's a lot of fun because you've got them around. It's that group mentality thing, you know. It's more fun. But when you're writing lyrics, that's a real discipline. You've got to go in a room entirely on your own, turn the lights down, sit there, usually a bottle of wine in my case, and you know, burn the midnight oil, really. And you might be... It's very, very intensive. It's just you and your brain and a computer. And it's very personal, very intensive. So I find that more of a chore, really. So I've got to make sure that the music is inspiring enough to get me to write the lyrics. You know, I've got to be excited about the music. If I hear a music track and go, wow, that sounds great, then it'll inspire me to write lyrics.
And
otherwise, it's too much of a chore.
Okay. And would you sit there and you'd be listening to the music and think, well, what does this suggest to me? Because I mean, one thing about your lyrics is that there's never a narrative. They're never, you know, they're kind of the opposite. To me, they're impressionistic. They're not like a country music song, for example, which would tell a story. You don't often get that.
I have done a couple like that, but I think if I did everyone like that, it would be boring.
Right.
And also, if you're writing for an album, you might have 18 songs to write, you know. And do you really have 18 things to say that are really that important that you need to get across to the general public in the space of like a couple of months. I don't think so, you know.
That's very honest, because I think a lot of people would say that, you know, they've got all this wealth of...
A lot of people pretend that they have, you know, but I'm not into that. So, yeah, they're impressionistic, really. I listen to the music and just try and make my mind go blank, really. A bit like meditation. I just try and stop thinking. That's the trick of it, is don't let your brain get in the way of your talent, you know, I always say. But I mean, so I try and stop thinking about the music and just see what pops up into my head, really. And then it's written. It's a bit like the old, you know, the ink block tests. A bit like those. What does it suggest to you, you know? And then I guess I talk about what the music suggests to me. It's a very subconscious way of doing it, but it's the way I feel most comfortable with, and it's the way I write the best lyrics, I think, after all these years.
Do you manage to forget about the audience? Do you manage to forget about the fact that people will be listening to these lyrics at home, possibly in the bedrooms, analysing, picking them apart?
Well, I think you write music for yourself, and that you pray and you hope that other people will enjoy it as much as you do, but you don't write it for other people, you know.
You just don't, so...
Because that way you become incredibly self-conscious, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'll write like one line, and that line will beget another line, to put it in biblical language, and that line will beget another line, you know. Each line will... And then you look at it and go, that's amazing, that song kind of wrote itself, you know. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work.
Don't you have time sitting there with the wine bottle slowly going down and the words aren't appearing on the computer?
Yes, but as the wine bottle goes down, the words then start to flow, yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it? It's
yeah.
Magic.
I mean, I don't do that all the time, you know, but it does lubricate the language.
You formed Electronic with Johnny Marr. He was coming out of the Smiths. You were in New Order. Both very, very iconic bands. Did you have a master plan when you started? Did you meet and have an idea of exactly what you were going to do?
Well, actually, well, I'd worked with Johnny before on a production that I did for Factory. It was actually Mike Pickering's group, and Johnny, I'd met him briefly then, but then I met him at a concert that New Order did in Berkeley in America, the west coast of America, and I was pretty burnt with New Order at that point, not with the band really, but with Tours of America. Touring with New Order was full on, you know, not just from the playing point of view, but, you know, we partied a lot, very, very lot. And I'm not blaming anyone, it was my own fault. But it all got too much for me, and I think the term is nervous exhaustion, really. And plus things were getting fraught in the studio, in that we were writing more synthesizer-based tracks, and the very nature of that is that if you're writing on a keyboard, on a computer, there's only one person can sit at the keyboard and operate the computer. So the very nature of that was not good, and I admit that. It wasn't good for the group, for everyone in the group, but unfortunately that was the kind of music that was happening at that time, and we were having hit records with that kind of music. And I felt that I was spending more and more time working on the computer, but being resented for it. I felt like I was being resented for the work that was putting in. So
creating this stuff.
Yeah, so I thought, well, I won't do it within the group. I'll form another group, Electronic, and I'll do that stuff within that group. And plus, I won't have to tour as much, you know. And by that time as well, I think Johnny was pretty burnt out. He'd done a hell of a lot of work in a very short time with the Smiths. So we just met each other at the right time, and Electronic really was a release for the pressures that we were feeling and couldn't deal with within our own groups. But the difference is, I guess, is that I was still carrying on with New Order. Johnny had left the Smiths and was looking for something, you know, to do, really.
And how did you write songs together? Was it very different from before?
I think Johnny was quite keen to learn about electronics and about, because he'd not been allowed to do any of that in the Smiths. So he was quite keen to, you know, find out how computers worked, and you've got to remember that the time that this was, and how to use samplers and sequencers, and because that was like a new world to him, like it was to me in the early 80s. That was a new world to me, and when he started working with me, he was like, oh wow, can you do this with that? And that was like a new world to him, and he started getting into all that side. And I was like, don't forget your guitar, don't forget your guitar, you know. So he was dead excited about that, really, you know. Like getting away with it was an interesting example. Basically, I started writing it, but I wrote the verse to it on a keyboard with a program beat, and Johnny came in and wrote the chorus. And by that time, Neil Tennant from the Pet Shop Boys had got in touch with us and said, I've heard what you're doing, I'd like to be involved, you know, can I get involved on one of the songs? So I said, yeah, well, we've got this song that we just written like yesterday, would you like to hear it? And just sent it to Neil, and he loved it, and he wrote the words for verse and chorus, and I wrote verse as well. And so that was a true collaboration between everyone involved, really.
The band's called Electronic. It gives it away to a certain extent. It wasn't written on acoustic guitars, but actually it translates perfectly. It works really, really well as a song, you know, as a traditional song. Yeah. There's a line I like very much. It's the first line of the first verse. I've been walking through the rain just to get wet on purpose. Was that one of yours, or was that one of Neil Tennant's?
If I was cheeky, I'd say it was one of mine, but I'm an honest person, and it was Neil's. Yeah, it's a good line, isn't it? I mean, that was a relief for me, having someone else around to, you know, to co-write lyrics. Obviously, it reduced my workload, which I loved, you know.
Which is good. And it must get the ball rolling. You know, I imagine you do. Once you get to know someone, you were saying before that you had this. Yeah,
and also, you know, lyrics. I've got this thing about lyrics are either about a very vague subject that you vaguely know what it's vaguely about, or it's someone moaning about something, complaining lyrics.
Well, it sounds like there's a bit of self-pity going on, you know. He's walking through the rain just to get wet on purpose.
Well, it could be that you've just understood a situation, couldn't it? And you're shocked by the situation, and you're walking through the rain trying to find out what to do about it. But that's the point about lyrics, why I don't really like explaining them, because everyone's got their own interpretation of them, and everyone's interpretation is the right interpretation, even if it's not the same one. A bit like a horoscope, really.
Something else we should say, your songwriting has involved collaboration, pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah, it has. I mean, that goes back again to that thing about being a self-taught musician and wanting to learn. You have to be on a constant voyage of discovery, or else that's what's exciting, you know. Oh, it's something new. Even to this day, I can, you know, get a new sound up or something, go, wow, that's great, what can you do with that, you know? And that's, you know, I've been a musician for 25, 30 years or something, and I still find it exciting, you know, and it, you know, because of that, you know, that you're always discovering something new.
Can you still get excited about music, as in not just the music you're making, but other people's music, discovering new things?
That's difficult, because we work about 12 to 14 hours a day in the studio. At the end of that, you don't have any time basically to do anything except go to bed. You get up the next day, pay your bills, go back in the studio. When you do get time off, which is usually at the weekend, the last thing you want to do is listen to music or go to a gig. So that's the downside of it, is that you being a long-term purveyor of music, you stop listening to it.
So now there is a new group, and this is Bad Lieutenant.
Well, we think we're going to call it Bad Lieutenant.
Lieutenant, okay. I always wondered how you pronounce that. I was never sure.
Well, it's from a book called The Bad Lieutenant, and also a film called Bad Lieutenant. We think we're going to call it that, but it's so hot off the press. I mean, we're in the studio at the moment, still beavering away. The group comprises of, here tonight we've got Phil Cunningham. He was a guitarist out of New Order. He played with us since 2001 in New Order. We've got Jake Evans. Jake's also singing on the album, so I've got a co-singer again, which is fantastic for me. And yes, I think it's going to be a really good album. We're going to play live with it. And do you want to hear one of the songs?
Is that all right? Sink or Swim, is this right?
Sink or Swim, yeah.
And I think, again, hot off the press, I think you're saying that the name has only just been decided, perhaps in the last couple of hours.
We think it's going to be called Sink or Swim.
For the time being,
think the band's going to be called Bad Lieutenant, but it might not.
It could all change.
You heard it here first.
We really did.
Yeah.
Brilliant. I'd love to hear it.
Okay. I'd like to introduce our guitarist Jake Evans as well. He's in a band called Rambo and Leroy. If I don't mention that, he'll kill me. Unfortunately, it's from Macclesfield, but we'll let that pass.